So in part one, we covered more agility work. Today, we're going to kind of finish that up, get into some other topics that tend to come up for speed and agility, and then we'll get into some of the different aspects of speed. And so let's talk about some other issues that tend to come up. This seems to be a consistent issue both for agility and speed, is inefficient knee lift, not having enough knee drive. So we want to incorporate some knee drive drills to be able to work on those mechanics, try to create a little bit of muscle memory for that. And so they can perform these high knee drills, focusing on driving the knee up with force while maintaining proper posture and getting that proper arm action going with it. So the emphasis is going to be a quick and powerful knee drive with every step, and make sure that the foot lands directly under the hip as they progress through. And you can see there kind of the sets and reps that I typically will do with an athlete when I'm working with them. And we want to really emphasize quality over quantity. We want to kind of slow that process down and really focus on technique. I mentioned this in the last webinar. We need to spend more time, a lot of times, slowing down, especially early on if we have a preseason or an off-season program for your specific sport, and take the time to slow down and really work on technique more, and then build into it by increasing more volume and speed and power and all those things. But it's kind of pointless to continue to try to increase volume if they're going to continue to do things wrong. So we would really want to emphasize technique on that. So here's an example. This is supposed to be just a general karaoke. If you notice, so there's a little bit of an incoordination between her upper and lower body. Her lower body's moving faster than her upper body is. We want to keep coordination between the arms and the feet movement. And if you also notice, there's not a lot of power in that knee, even on just something like this. This is just a simple warm-up drill, but we really want to focus on technique. We really want to focus on driving that knee up and getting that pop that goes with it. So this is a good example here. If you know, she's got a good knee drive and pop. We've got coordination between the upper and lower body. We've got good arm movement. These are the little ticky-tacky things that we really want to pick apart and put more emphasis on. So here's some examples. You can do a simple wall drill where you work on knee drive. And again, this kind of breaks down the power line that we want to generate when we're talking about knee drive, and especially with certain phases. If you've got a sprinter, if we were dealing specifically with track, those things we want to make sure that we're generating that power line to where we get the high knee drive. We have good ankle position and a good shin angle that goes with it. And so some of the things that you can do, we have hurdle drills. There's single leg knee drive drills that you can also do, where you can put a ladder down and have them where they drive the knee up and it goes inside the square of the ladder. And then it's just a general step with the other leg, and then turn around and flip them and have them come back with the opposite leg. Just really working on driving that knee up. Here's another one that you can do. This one's weighted, but you don't necessarily have to do it weighted. And what you do is you take them down into a single leg RDL, and then have them work on coming up and driving that knee up out of the RDL. So it kind of generates a little bit of momentum, but also requires them to engage their core more, works on balance, and a little bit of coordination as well. So this is a good drill that you could incorporate. So poor back pedal technique. So I've tried to keep this kind of related to sports in general. So whether you're actually specifically talking about football or soccer, or even baseball and softball, or if you just have general track type events that you're trying to work through, I try to incorporate a number of different things in here. So with this, we have backpedaling. And this is going to help improve the back pedal technique. This is a really big deal as far as having the proper body position, making sure that they're balanced, and that they're continuous in their movement. So with this one, you want the athlete to start low in their athletic stance, be able to keep a good center of gravity, and maintaining a forward lean while keeping the eyes up. There's a tendency to drop the head down. You want to get them to keep those eyes up. Especially, very common when it would be like a DB drill, a defensive back drill for football. You want them to have their eyes up on the person that they're supposed to be defending. If we're talking about something as simple as a baseball drill, being able to keep the play in front of them, be able to see the play, and so it's these little things that we need to make sure that we're paying attention to really break those things down and don't allow those things to slide. So the emphasis with this is going to be quick, controlled backward movement, making sure that we have good, proper arm action with it, and then being able to maintain balance. Because there's a tendency, especially with body position, if they get too high, you'll see them. They'll start getting on their heels, and then they'll fall backwards. Making sure that we're over our toes and midfoot through that movement, and then maintaining our balance and coordination through our core and with our arm action. So you can kind of see the position there on the far right. You'll see the starting position. If you notice, he's maintaining a low position. I would like to see a little bit more, even though these are stills, I would like to see a little bit more exaggerated arm action with this, getting those arms moving. Because if we don't get the arms generated moving, we're actually slowing down. Our body is going to coordinate, and we're going to generate more speed if the upper body and lower body are working in coordination together. So we've got to make sure that those are in sync. So slow and inefficient direction changes. So the things that we need to do, that's quick change reaction drills. Changing direction. So it enhances agility, that's the whole principle behind agility, is the ability to be able to quickly and effectively change direction. So we want to have a sharp direction change and be able to maintain control speed and be able to stay balanced. So something simple, you can set up cones and markers to do like a zigzag pattern, where the athlete sprints forward, they change direction either laterally or they go into a back pedal. So you can start to incorporate some of these other things. And also being able to do a quick lateral shuffle, maybe work on some crossover steps if the sport that you work with allows crossover steps. There's some sports that you really don't want that crossover because people can get their feet tangled up. But you just kind of formulate it to what you need specifically for your sport. But the emphasis is going to be quick and explosive change of direction. So being able to lower their center of gravity, be able to explode out of that position, and gain speed quickly, while maintaining balance and control, and then they want to have good body position overall. So this is just a simple one. You have your simple Z pattern, or they'll call it an N pattern, where they sprint forward, back pedal at an angle, and then sprint. There's so many different varieties that you can do out of this. Here's another one. This is just a set of cone agility drills. There's sometimes that I think people just put cones out or draw cones out and then just see what kind of shapes they can make out of it. But there's such a variety of different things that you can do to be able to work on that. The point though is making sure that with that change of direction, they're lowering their center of gravity, that they don't get on their heels, that they have proper braking and breakdown when they have to change that direction, and then a good, sharp, hard push-off movement. While keeping their feet and the ankles, under their hips, and don't allow them to overextend and push out, because then that's when we start getting into developing knee issues and ankle issues if we allow them to get too wide in their base, especially when trying to change direction. So those are little key things that you want to make sure that you're looking for. Here's another one that's just a 6-cone drill. So a different variety of things that you can do with that. So you get the pro agility T drills. Most people know those, an L drill. So there's a variety of different ways that you can do this. So another issue could be lack of coordination and power in our leg movements. So we can do simple things like hurdle drills. In football, we call them bag drills. You could do small mini hurdles. There's so many different ways that you can do this one. The point is what you're trying to emphasize. So you want to make sure that you're emphasizing proper arm and leg movement coordination, getting good knee lift and explosiveness, and then generating power with each movement. So you're going to set up a series of hurdles or bags, whatever, and you can do simple things like hops, single leg hops, things like that over hurdles. And then the emphasis is just proper technique, making sure that you're focusing on that explosive power, and quick contact, and maintaining balance. And we'll talk a little bit about the importance of core control, because most of your balance is going to come out of your core and glute engagement. So you've got to make sure that you're emphasizing those things and paying attention, and don't allow those things to slide. If they don't do it right, make them come back and do it again, and really break down those technique issues that they need to be focusing on to get that down. So this is just a simple diagram here. You got your simple bag drills. But again, you can use any type of hurdle that you want to do. And if you're having to really work on also knee drive and getting knee height up, then set the barrier or the hurdle higher for them to be able to have to step over. So there's a lot of things that you can kind of cross train in with these techniques. So you have the simple 1-2 foot over. You can have the in and out drill, lateral in and out. Lateral 2 foot, over. You can even do some change of direction, things like that, where you have them take a couple steps over, go back, and then go back again. And so again, kind of play with it. That kind of breaks up the monotony as well as some of the drills, because if you just do the same drills over and over again, it gets boring for you, it gets boring for the athletes, and try to have some fun with it. So again, you have little mini hurdles that you can use, and they actually make these hurdles with a lot of different heights that you can use. So and these don't take up a lot of space. That's the thing with the bags, is they do take up a lot of space. We had, I know a couple of the places I've worked, we had an entire shed that was full of the bags, whereas this is a lot more space efficient. So those are things you consider as well. So slow reaction time and decision making. So reactive agility drills. I did a lot of these, especially when I coached football, working on being able to change direction based off of what they see or something that they hear, having some sort of visual or auditory cue, such as a command, or you have them flash a hand and they have to change that direction, or if you flash a hand to make them go the opposite direction. So you want to really work on that. And that's a mental cognition thing. And the more that you develop that, you have to work the mental aspect just as much as you do the physical aspect. And we're trying to create that link between the cognitive and the physical, to be able to increase processing speed and get more efficiency out of our athletes. So so they're going to do a predetermined movement, such as sprint, shuffle, some sort of change of direction, and they're going to respond to a cue. You could do the same thing with your cone drills. You could have them sprint forward, and or a T drill, you can make them decide, you have to point which direction you want them to go or what you want them to do next, and then they have to respond. So the emphasis here is quick and precise reactions. Make sure they keep proper technique throughout the entire movement and control when they respond to the cue. So this is just a simple one that we would do. That I would have the athlete start there, and right there at the Y, I would stand right there at the Y. And as soon as they got to me, kind of where that second set of markers are, as soon as they got to me, I would flash hands one way or the other and they would have to plant their feet and change direction and explode and generate power and being able to change direction real quick. And if they didn't do it right, or if they stumbled, or if I'd make them go back and do it again until we got it right. So that's just an example. There's a lot of different varieties that you can do out of that, though. So the main key points out of all this is making sure that you're giving good feedback, and we get visual demonstrations. Again, I mentioned this in the previous webinar. It's really good if you can give them video feedback. If you can video the drills, if you can video what they're doing technique-wise and be able to show it to them, it's a lot more impactful than trying to explain it to them. And even sometimes you can have somebody else show them the right thing, but until they see themselves doing it, a lot of times they won't make that connection. So it's really good if you can video their movement patterns and then also be able to show it to them when they do it right. And then be able to help them develop that muscle memory so that they have that visual that goes with it. Rest periods, with drills, there's a tendency to run people through drills and fatigue, as everybody knows, that any type of sport, fatigue is an issue. The more fatigue kicks in, the more technique starts going out the window. We start losing concentration. We start having slower, decision making, processing skills, and so we have to really work those things, build up, and then after you get the technique down, then you can start inducing things like fatigue, and then emphasizing technique while they're in fatigue. But you've got to get those techniques down, when they're not fatigued first. Because wearing them out and then trying to harp on technique when you haven't corrected the technique when they're fresh, you're kind of beating your head against the wall with that. So you want to make sure that you're working those technique things and then start doing things like inducing fatigue and then reinforcing that technique issue. Don't allow them to get sloppy in their technique, which is very, very easy to do. So as the athletes progress and their abilities improve, okay, then you can start working also in endurance, the number of steps and duration, and be intentional on focusing on individual factors like sport specific things, going into your training phases and actually being intentional about where you incorporate these into your training phase, and then making sure that your athlete is actually ready to progress. You need to, when your athletes come in, especially when you start your off season, you need to do everybody does some form of assessment to get a baseline of where your athlete is, and then you need to make decisions whether they need to progress. If we can progress, if they get to a point where the progression is too fast or too difficult, then we may have to regress a little bit and take a step back with them. And I know with some sports, when you have a lot of athletes that you're having to deal with, especially with bigger schools, you got a lot of athletes. It's real easy to just allow them to just run through without putting a lot of focus, because you're just trying to get them through drills rather than taking the time and really focus on those techniques. That's why you really need to start working on it when off season starts, and start picking those things apart when you've got a little bit more time to do it, and you're not trying to get through your preseason drill or pre-practice drills, and then that way you can get right into skill sets. So be very intentional about how you work these things in. Okay, so let's talk a little bit about core engagement. Core is extremely important. Your balance comes out of your core, and your movement initiation should also come out of your core. One of the things that I really work on with athletes when I first get them is we talk about in core engagement. This is really the first thing that I work on is core. And then also breathing pattern, make sure they understand what diaphragmatic breathing is and get them used to that pattern of being able to breathe through their diaphragm, and not just chest breathe, just so that we understand biomechanically, your diaphragm is the primary muscle for breathing, and you've got to be able to allow room while you have core tension to be able to strengthen that diaphragm. You can strengthen that diaphragm just like any other muscle, but you have to provide resistance for it. And if all you allow them to do is chest breathe, all the muscles that are there for chest breathing are secondary breathing muscles. If you never work the primary muscle, then you're never going to get the lung volume and the lung capacity that you should be getting out of your athlete. So let's talk about a couple things that you can do with this. This is how I start athletes. So my children are always subjected to whatever I'm working on, so they get to be in all my pictures, and I've even got a couple of books out. They've been on the cover of my book. So, but this is my daughter. She is a power lifter, so core is extremely important for her. She does have 2 national titles and a state title. But what I'm doing there is I'm demonstrating we're working on breathing techniques. So what I'm doing is I'm taking gravity out of the situation. We elevate the feet so that the low back will relax. And we take the tension off the core. We take the tension off the hip flexors, keep the head in a neutral position. And then I have one hand on the chest and one hand on the stomach. And I tell them, all I want to see is your stomach go up and down. I want them to really isolate on that diaphragmatic breathing and getting that breathing pattern down. Okay. And then from there, I have them shift their hands out to the side to where we do what was called alligator breathing. So what I'm telling her to do is I'm telling her to tighten her core up, okay, and continue to breathe through her stomach. Try to continue to diaphragmatic breathe. For some people, this is going to be very, very difficult to do. I'll be honest with you, some of the people that I've worked with that are also athletes, the ones that get this pattern down and actually do really well with it from the very get-go are people in band and choir, because they're taught to breathe, they're taught to diaphragmatic breathe to get maximum lung volume. But the problem is we don't do that with our athletes. And so we tighten the core up there and continue to work on breathing. So we're applying resistance to the diaphragm and trying to make the diaphragm still contract so that we can get increased lung volume. And then from there, I'm having her contract her core. All right. The hip flexors are meant to just hold the leg stable, and she's contracting her core to roll her hips up enough to elevate her feet off the chair that I have there and continue to breathe. And so that what we're trying to induce there is 360 core engagement. You have two main components to your core. You have your internal and your external core. Your internal core is going to be your psoas muscles and your spine. External core is going to be your posterior chain, your anterior chain, and then both your laterals on each side. And so we're trying to get true 360 core engagement when we initiate movement, when we lift, and get that down as a subconscious pattern. The only way they're going to be able to get to that point is if you're constantly reinforcing it and making them do it. Otherwise, they're just relying on individual muscle movement engagement for an extremity instead of learning how to generate power and speed out of their core. And when I work lateral, I put them in a lateral position there. And what I'm doing is I want to make sure that she's actually truly engaging her lateral core, and she elevates her body up to where the hip comes up off the table. And it's being supported on the shoulder and the knee. But the thing that you have to watch for with that is they're truly engaging the core to lift their body up. They're not throwing their hip up, catching, and then trying to hold. So we're really truly engaging that core from there. And then from here, what we're looking at is I put them in a prone position. So if you really want to put somebody in a true plank, what I have them do is dig their toes in, knees stay in contact with the table or the floor. The elbows are up around ear level. And we don't allow them to bring those elbows in. We want those elbows to stay out. And then what I'm telling her to do is engage her core, not lift her butt up and hold. I want her truly engage her core to lift her body up off the floor into a flat back position and be able to hold that with her core. If you work that with your athletes, you're going to really see some changes and some significant improvement in their core engagement. Okay, so let's talk a little bit about speed problems. Weak and explosive power. So you have insufficient strength and power in the muscles that you have to have for explosive movements. You have all your different muscle fibers. You have your slow twitch, your fast twitch. So you have your type 1s, your type 2A, type 2B that all have different components. And so we've got to make sure that we're working all those different components for our athletes. Poor muscular symmetry, especially through the glutes, hip flexors, and hamstrings. If you have a lot of problems with athletes generating low back pain, you need to stretch those hip flexors out. They need to work on glute engagement. If they complain about tight hamstrings, you need to stretch the hip flexors out first. And there's a whole thing that I can get into with the biomechanics of the pelvis and how all that works. But have them really focus on the hip flexors and being stretched out, and glute engagement are so under addressed with athletes. So poor running mechanics. So one of the things that we can see is people overstriding, taking too large a step, excessive vertical oscillation, which means they're coming up too fast, improper arm swing. So we end up with that incoordination from between upper body and lower body, and just that lack of coordination overall. And so the thing that I heard this analogy, and I started explaining this to athletes, and it made more sense, especially with when I was working with sprinters. When you first start, you think about it, if everybody thinks about when you're a kid, you had a bicycle, you'd be working on it, flip it over upside down, and you could take your hand. You would have to actually grab the tire and pull it to get it going. But once it got going, you were able to just kind of slap it and keep going. And sprint mechanics are very much the same way. When somebody initially takes off, you're really having to grab a hold and dig to be able to generate that speed. But once you get that speed, now it's more of a slapping action to be able to just continue to generate and maintain that top speed level. And when I started explaining that to athletes, it really connected with them and it made more sense to them. The difference between when they started versus when they reached their top speed to be able to run through. Slow reaction times is another issue with speed. You know, not taking off when the starting gun does, not reacting to the visual cues that are going on in front of them. And so these are things that we need to work on. Limited mobility and flexibility. That's probably one of the biggest things that I see about athletes. They don't stretch enough. We don't emphasize it enough to make sure that they've got good mobility, especially through their hips, ankle mobility. You know, if you've got an athlete that can't go down into a squat without lifting their heels up off the ground, that's a problem. They have an ankle mobility problem that needs to be addressed. You know, hips, you know, again, we talked about the hip flexors being too tight. Everybody's got quad dominance, but it depends on how it's affecting you biomechanically. And I put athletes through the complete functional assessment, and we break all these things down. Things like thoracic spine. If they can't get enough extension, if somebody goes down into a squat and they can't bring their chest up into a squat, that's a spinal mobility issue. That's a thoracic spine mobility issue that needs to be worked on. And so you start ending up with things like, you know, restricted range of motion, and then that's going to affect, you know, efficiency. Think also just rotational through the spine. If they can't rotate efficiently through the spine, think about it from a baseball player standpoint. If they're a right-handed batter and they can't turn to the left, what's that going to do to their bat speed? It's going to slow the bat speed down. It's also going to affect their ability to be able to follow through on an effective throw. It's going to slow them down. So those are things that we need to really pay attention and look at. Inadequate strength in our stabilizing muscles, especially our core muscles, and then around our hips. Our lateral stabilizers are a lot of times are under addressed, and making sure we're having that good balance between our anterior and posterior chain. That's going to end up with compromised posture. You're going to have balance issues, and then you're going to have inefficient power transfer from the upper and lower body. Also, inefficient stride length or frequency. So you're going to have reduced distance that are covered with each, reduced number of steps. So, you know, that's kind of the opposite of the overstriding that you see. And then lack of endurance, you know, having an aerobic capacity, muscular endurance, especially with, you know, you have certain games like football, soccer that are much longer, and it requires them to be able to generate speed and power for much greater amounts of time. Okay, and then just the mental aspect of it, psychological factors. Sports psychology is a booming business right now because people are starting to really address the psychological effects that things are having on athletes and helping them keep their mental space where it needs to be. So just some of the top drills, resisted sprints. This could be anything from a band drill, you know, parachute, those types of things that you're working on explosive power and strength. So those are the things you can see there, the problems that it's going to correct. Any insufficient explosion, lack of acceleration and speed, especially at the start, and then a weak stride length. Overspeed training, this is where you have them run down hills, having something that's assisting them to make them go faster. So when it talks about bungee cords, you're actually pulling the bungee cord at to its max, and then having them run back towards the direction of the bungee cord to be able to assist and be able to get more speed generation out of them. So you're helping them try to gain more speed with it instead of applying resistance. It's kind of the opposite effect. So reactive agility training, we talked about that a little bit. Some of the reactive agility drills, shuttle runs, cone drills, being able to apply visual and auditory cues with that. So we talked about that already. Flying sprints. This is more of a timed sprint zone, so you want to get them up to full speed and have them stay at that full speed and maintain it for a certain amount of time. And so there, it could be around 20 seconds, those types of things, and start working through that. Okay, then you want to contrast your training, so you start applying a little bit of resistance. So one of my favorite things I love to do is apply sleds, with sprints. And it doesn't have to be a tremendous amount of weight, but just enough resistance that makes them get into that proper body position, that proper body lean that really makes them work on arm and leg drive and knee drive. So we're adding a little bit of resistance with that. Reactive strength training. This is going to be your plyometrics, especially different phasing. One of the things that I'll throw out there with this is box drills. A lot of times everybody focuses on box drills jumping up on top of the box. What about if you start them on top of the box and then have them jump down and then they have to bounce back up? That kind of works two different phases, especially for a sprinter. With a sprinter, we talked about that action of having to be able to push off in order to be able to gain speed. So you generate some power and momentum jumping up on the box, but then what about jumping off? And then it's minimal touch and then right back up again. And so you're also working on a little bit of reaction with that. Staircase sprints, again, we're working on knee drive, proper body position, enhancing leg power, stride length, and then you're going to really work their cardiovascular with this one. Assisted treadmill runs, you'll see some people that's been out on the internet and TikTok and all that, where they get on this on the treadmill and then they crank that treadmill up and then they've got to get on there and they're maintaining that maintaining that speed for a certain amount of time. And some of them will actually do it barefoot. I don't recommend top speed barefoot until they get used to that. But the point behind, unless they have severe flat feet and they have those kind of issues that they still need to maintain wearing their shoes. The thing with doing stuff barefoot, especially on turf, is it allows them to be able to work on strengthening their ankles and their feet. So that brings me to this. This is my information here. And I will turn it back over to Saxton